Welcome to The Beat, everyone. I'm Ari Melber. We begin with the Epstein uproar continuing. New details today that undercut White House claims as well as fueling more questions. NBC News reporting top officials did huddle last night specifically to discuss the Epstein scandal and what they will do about ongoing questions and transparency, something that VP Vance basically all but denied yesterday. Maybe Trump officials are rattled. Maybe they don't have one story to tell. The meeting followed that messaging from the president, who handed the mic to Vice President Vance, who said they weren't going to be doing that kind of meeting, call that fake news. But the reporting says that Attorney General Bondi and FBI Director Patel were there, and that this occurred different than some of the initial reports, ultimately at the White House. Now, if the location changed, but the topics and meeting participants stayed the same, it looks like basically the core point of the early reporting that they were so quick to deny, that there was a kind of high-level emergency Epstein meeting, still happened. Now, here's Vance and Trump, as mentioned.
It's completely fake news. We're not meeting to talk about the Epstein situation. And I think the reporter who reported it needs to get better sources.
Look, the whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats because we've had the most successful 6 months in the history of our country. And that's just a way of trying to divert attention to something that's total bullshit.
The president there, who has increasingly sounded disinhibited in this second term, swearing in public, not something we usually see from presidents, but more important than the rhetoric are the underlying facts. That contrary to the denials, there is evidence and reporting, there is a meeting. That contrary to the initial claims that Donald Trump and his team would bring transparency to the Epstein case, the Epstein files, as we've heard them called, no transparency at all. And MAGA leaders, among others, saying it's a cover-up. And despite the denial, the report suggests that the strategy meeting at Vance's residence was basically canceled in response to the reporting about it. So again, they are trying to do certain things while not getting caught doing those things, and they are willing to change locations or perhaps other details for the optics. But the story goes well beyond optics, with reporting that casts doubt about Trump's denials and the way that he has tried to defend whatever his history is with Epstein. He had recently claimed to have banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago in 2000. Aides said that he did ban the now deceased sex trafficker, but it was later in 2004. But a New York Post article stokes different questions because it was in 2007 that outlet, a tabloid that has long covered Donald Trump, far, far longer than he was in politics, noted that Epstein denies he's banned from Mar-a-Lago and says, in fact, he was recently invited to an event there. Now, that doesn't squash or end the matter, because it may be that Epstein was trying to get out from under the perception that he's banned. And of course, you could be banned from somewhere and still have someone invite you there, not knowing you're banned. So a lot of that just feeds, again, the questions about why it's so hard for everyone involved in their history to explain exactly what it was and when it ended. New heat on Trump, meanwhile, from MAGA, as we've been telling you. Trump has all but kept the door open to pardoning the only living Epstein conspirator in prison, Ms. Maxwell. Far-right podcaster Candace Owens responding thusly.
Don't even act surprised when he pardons Ghislaine Maxwell. That would just be foolish of you, foolish of me to think that he's not going to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, okay? Trump is implicated by his sheer deceit right now in this moment. He is being so deceitful. It's incredible.
Trump officials scrambling to get their story straight. MAGA voices, who have been loyal on many other issues and controversies, have now made it clear week after week, this one is different. They will not go along with the spin or outright lies, some call it. Gaslighting, Joe Rogan call it. The heat from MAGA is a reminder that a president who has at times had an almost cult-like loyalty, which many politicians would like, is finding limits on it early in the second term. With that in mind, we turn to a guest well-versed on exactly these issues. Sarah Matthews served as Trump White House Deputy Press Secretary, currently serves working with the Home of the Brave PAC, but also has distanced herself from Donald Trump from Jan 6 on. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me on again.
What do you see specifically in a MAGA revolt that will not quiet as Donald Trump betrays or breaks many of the vows that he and others made about transparency, at least in this case?
Yeah, this is something that Donald Trump campaigned on. He said that when he was put back in office that he would release this list. And it wasn't just him, it was many of these administration officials as well. You look at folks like Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, they were out there saying the same thing, that they wanted to see transparency when it came to Jeffrey Epstein. And all of a sudden, they seem to have changed their tune. You obviously know that Pam Bondi initially had all these right wing influencers come to the White House and they gave them these binders of phase one of releasing the Epstein files. And then all of a sudden, the White House no longer wants to talk about it. Donald Trump keeps saying that this is a hoax. He's saying that using colorful language to describe it, as you noted as well at the top of the program. And it just begs the question, what are they trying to cover up? Because they either have to admit that they lied to their voters about there being a list, or they need to acknowledge that they're part of the cover up when it comes to this. And it's not only a slap in the face to their voters when they campaigned on this, more importantly, it's a slap in the face to the victims who really deserve answers and transparency on this issue.
Let's take a listen to Congresswoman Mace, how she's trying to play this.
Most of the voters that I talk to want to see the files released. I mean, that's what I've heard all across South Carolina.
But they're blaming the president's administration, Bondi, for not being transparent enough. Do you understand why they feel that way?
Well, I know that the president has asked for files to be released, like the transcript from the grand jury. He asked for those files to come out and be released, and I guess the judge blocked it.
Sarah, we've seen some elected Republicans do that dance while the base and the sort of podcasters and new media folks who are clearly not as one note as, say, Fox News are taking a different tune. Given that you yourself have spoken out against Donald Trump, while you obviously work for him for some reasons, you drew a line and then experienced sort of the backlash that can come from that on the right or with MAGA. What do you think of this type of revolt, and how does it play inside the White House, given your knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, this definitely is difficult for Republicans to manage. Obviously, with anything with Donald Trump, they're constantly towing a line and trying to appease him. But with this issue in particular, we're seeing that it's sticking around. It's not going away. Obviously, we've been talking about it in the news for weeks. And so this isn't something that I feel like these elected officials can just ignore or brush off because they know that their constituents want answers. And especially when you're coming from some of those more deep red districts, I think, or deep red states, they know that their constituents in particular really care about this issue. And so they can't just brush it off, even though obviously the White House would love for them to do that. But I think it makes it even more difficult for someone, not just like a Nancy Mace, but you look at Speaker Mike Johnson and how he's had to navigate this. He literally sent his office and everyone out of DC for the summer already and started the August recess early because he doesn't want to be talking about this issue and he's just hoping that it will go away.
Do you think that basically this whole approach you're talking about, make it go away, run out the clock? Do you think there's any risk that sort of they lose people in a more fundamental way? We talked this week about how George Bush withstood many scandals and criticisms, but ultimately he had a Katrina moment. He never rebounded from it. Do you think Epstein could grow that large, or is that sort of misunderstanding the way this movement works, one you know about?
I think with any controversy with Donald Trump, it always appears like he's Teflon. Nothing is able to stick, and the news cycle quickly changes, and he's able to bounce right back from any controversy I've ever witnessed with him. But this seems to be like the one that might have some sticking power. And I think it's because his MAGA base cares so deeply about this issue and he's trying to gaslight them. And I
Hmm.
think that they're actually seeing through the lies and the distractions that him and the administration are pushing. And so it doesn't matter how many backroom, war room strategy type of meetings that this White House and the DOJ and the FBI are going to have on how to combat this. It I think that the voters and the American people are demanding transparency and answers on this. And it does seem to really have riled up the base. As you noted with the podcaster types of Candace Owens, Joe Rogan, they're talking about this issue too. And a lot of those newer voters that came into the coalition for Trump who voted for him in 2024, they aren't as loyal maybe as some of the OG MAGA base.
Hmm.
And so I think that a lot of those voters are going to be really, really upset. And that's not exactly what you want as we go into the midterm election cycle, that this is what we're talking about, that we're talking about Epstein. And it does just appear like there is a cover up happening from the administration.
Yeah. OG MAGA base, Sarah. I don't know that one, but I think I understand it. And you are reminding people Trump picked up a couple points in 24. So those are people by definition statistically that may not have been there, as you say. And so they're more up for grabs. Even Rogan went from Bernie Sanders, people might recall, all the way over to Trump. He's got 30 million listeners, give or take. And as you say, if he's not OG, might also be more debatable. So that's super interesting. Sarah Matthews, thank you. Let me tell folks what's coming up. We got a basic fact check on these free speech debates and why one Russian author is saying Trump is doing Soviet tactics, an economic fact check as well, and an Epstein survivor joins us later this hour. We'll be back in 90 seconds. Back with the White House pressure that they're facing on the Epstein case. Trump's orbit know it. We've seen the top officials who held the strategy session that they tried to deny holding because they didn't want to politically look like this was some emergency thing. They want to claim that this is going away. No signs of that. More Epstein victims are speaking out as well about the apparent leniency for Ms. Maxwell and the botched handling of the secrecy around this case. As I mentioned, we have one such individual coming up this hour, but I want to begin with Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Eugene Robinson. You have covered so many issues in that town. How do you think this one is going, and what do you make of the White House really struggling to contain it, even on a day-by-day basis, let alone find an ending to something with so many open questions?
Well, this one seems to have some kind of staying power. It seems to have legs, Ari. And one reason is that the Trump administration keeps finding ways to keep the story alive. They can't just, they're the ones really who can't stop talking about it. Apparently, calling the strategy session to talk about how to maybe eventually stop talking about it. I mean, it's not just Democrats or progressive liberals, enemies of Trump, who are keeping this alive. The difference here is that it's the MAGA base that expected him to release Epstein files, an Epstein list, and is not going to be satisfied until he either does or explains more forthrightly why he won't.
Yeah, as you say, there are many broken promises in politics, but so many of them are forward-looking, like, we will build a wall. Oh, we didn't get to. We'll blame someone. So be it. Here it was, we have the list, but the Attorney General tells them on Fox they have the list, and then, oops, we can't release it. So it feels very much like their cover-up.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And remember, at the heart of this is a moral issue, right? I mean, and that's what it was for a lot of people who really believed in a larger conspiracy, pedophile conspiracy. Maybe it was Democrats, maybe who knows who it was, but they believed that this existed. And here we have Jeffrey Epstein, who did these things, and Donald Trump was supposed to be the mighty weapon against all of this evil,
Right. The so-called deep state.
Yeah, right. And so you can't feel two ways about what Jeffrey Epstein did, and so why isn't the president releasing all the information that he has, that the government has about Epstein? It just seems like something it seems like a moral issue that people should know this, and people perhaps should be punished for participating in what Epstein was doing.
Right. So you mentioned the moral part, and Gene, stay with me. We turn to our next guest, who faced Epstein's abuse, Jess Michaels. She has previously spoken out about Epstein raping her in the early 1990s. She was 22 at the time. She's also now an advocate for sexual abuse victims. She founded Three Joannes, a resource to help survivors. Jess, thanks for being here. Uh, what do you want people to know? What is important about all this within the context of the wider debate, scandal, secrecy we've seen out of this Trump White House?
Thank you so much for having me on, Ari. I really appreciate you being willing to hear a survivor's perspective, but not only a survivor's perspective, but an advocate's perspective on what's happening, because there are several things I see happening. One is this is a very personal, painful, both physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually painful experience to go through, to see the level of injustice that's continuing to happen, that has been going on now for decades. It's especially egregious because the victims did the right thing. They went to authorities. They've done all the right things. They have told their story over and over and over again, and no one is listening. The second part of that that I believe is truly problematic in the big picture is that I believe what we're seeing is a normalization of the decriminalization of sexual harm, rape, assault, pedophilia, and trafficking. And one of the reasons I'm saying that is it's not just that they're ignoring survivors when they're having meetings, when they're discussing, when they're talking with the convicted pedophile sex trafficker. They're never, I have not heard the words Epstein survivor out of the White House ever.
Mhm. Right. And there's a lot of the approach that's been about sort of the political content of it. One real world result is the apparent leniency for an Epstein conspirator, Maxwell. What is your view of that?
Oh, I think that's part of the reason why I believe there's this undercurrent of decriminalization and making her look like a victim. I'm really shocked and not that this woman has been able to weasel her way into working towards a pardon, working towards leniency. I mean, the shocking fact is that this crime is rarely makes it to court. 10% of cases make it to court. 2.5% actually end up in jail. And we finally got one. We finally got one with so much evidence. So much evidence. If this one doesn't stick, how will any others after this? I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking decades of evidence, volumes of evidence.
Yeah. Jess Michaels, as mentioned, we wanted to hear from you and get that context. Gene was talking about the moral dimension of this. Thanks to both of you. I'll tell viewers we're going to fit in a break, and then we have a fact check on this crackdown on free speech when we come back. Donald Trump's trade war heating up again, while he also tries to use and sometimes blatantly abuse federal government power to take control of free markets on Wall Street. An interesting contrast, as we've reported, because so many Wall Street folks worried that past Democratic administrations would interfere in their business. But this first year of Trump second term has done so more than any modern administration. As for the tariffs, today they are here hitting many countries, raising import taxes to the highest level since the Great Depression, as prices are up and job growth has slowed. Trump also meddles with these private companies. You have the tariffs, which so many American companies have vocally said will hurt both their employees and consumers in this country. But then you have the wider kind of Castro-style meddling in what businesses do. And in some cases, it is an abuse of power. Overnight, the price of Intel dropped because Trump said the CEO must resign. Again, imagine if Fidel Castro, FDR, or any liberal president was just randomly taking shots at presidents or CEOs of companies. He also raised the sort of specter of conflicts with China, but didn't use any due process. Remember, he oversees the Justice Department. He's not just a pundit here. And it raises the question of whether, if he doesn't get his way, he'll have the DOJ investigate or do a sham probe. The Financial Times reported bankers find deal making tougher. The partisan agenda is clear. One saying it's a level of intrusion from this Republican White House they've never experienced before. In other words, worse than Obama or Clinton or other times where we did hear bankers worry about this, but now it's actually happening. Back in 2013, when Obama was using regular policy, not threats, we heard from Republicans that the president was trying to meddle to the point of picking winners and losers. Trump is actually doing that to a far, far higher degree, naming CEOs that should be fired, blatantly telling companies how to do hiring, whether to run diversity programs, etc. And remember, this is what Republicans said they opposed.
It's a trade-off that's at the very core of a country founded on the sacred rights of the individual, the liberty of each and every American. But it is not government's role to pick the winners and losers.
Government picking winners and losers and losing big.
It's socialism. It's command economy. It's picking winners and losers.
Yeah, but
I worked for Ronald
it's
Reagan.
energy.
Ronald Reagan was not in favor of picking winners and losers.
That is how it sounded as a political attack. But the underlying concern is true. People don't like to be overregulated, and there's a lot of evidence that government systems like Cuba or China that have too much government involvement in the free market economy tend to interfere, slow growth. There's actual evidence on this. And then there's, of course, the actual justice and democracy of it. We have a constitutional system, much as Trump might try to push against it, and we've seen that play out in the courts, where the president does not just order enemies rounded up or businesses destroyed if he doesn't like what they're doing. It's called free markets and freedom. So it was interesting when CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin, who is very well sourced in this space, told us about top powerful Wall Street people who worry about Trump going after them, investigating them, or even, as you'd see in Russia, jailing them.
After this horrific shooting that happened in Midtown Manhattan earlier this week, this is one of those opportunities to have a reasonable conversation about gun violence in America. And a couple of CEOs called me up who said, yeah, we should be having that conversation, but I can't have that conversation because right now I'll lose that conversation. The president, if he wants to put me in jail, he can put me in jail.
And then the tariffs. They have already rattled the markets. These new ones, of course, are just being absorbed, and there is a ebb and flow to it, or what Wall Street has called Trump chickening out. But we know when the early tariffs sunk stocks, plenty of those vocal MAGA podcasters didn't like it.
Trump has put his tariffs all over the place. I've been trying to understand them. I don't.
His giant tariff policy that he just dropped on the market unilaterally, probably unconstitutionally.
I don't know how many of you guys are invested in crypto or stocks. What the is going on with our country? Guys, why am I poor?
Everything's in the shitter because of it. I'm down $7 million in stocks and crypto.
We're going to see more of the same and more of that revolt. Well, economist Justin Wolfers will break it down next. We're back with University of Michigan economics professor Justin Wolfers, hosts the podcast Think Like an Economist. Welcome back.
Glad to be here, mate.
Let's start with what it means that under Trump, the United States is moving more towards what we'd see in Russia or Cuba than what we traditionally expect in the U.S. You can have a hawkish or dovish trade policy on the one hand, but on the other, we have a president who publicly admits he wants to pick the CEOs and he wants to threaten people within business.
I'm really glad you're picking up on this, Ari. This is the most interventionist White House of my lifetime. This is a guy who thinks that he knows who should run Intel, that he should tell Tim Cook where Apple should run its factories, that he should call Harvard and tell it what should be on its curriculum and who it should be hiring. There's not a CEO alive in America right now who isn't constantly thinking about what is going on in the White House. That's a very, very dangerous situation. So first of all, Do you trust the judgment of the guy in the White House to make a better iPhone or of Tim Cook? And second of all, would you prefer that Tim Cook spent his days thinking about how best to please the president, what shiny bauble to bring him, or would you prefer him to be able to do what his predecessor Steve Jobs did? Steve was a brilliant visionary who spent his time thinking about how to design a more beautiful iPhone. And I don't mean this as a statement about phones. I mean it as a metaphor for the American economy. Who should be making those choices and what it is that they should be focused on? And right now we look a lot like Turkey, like Argentina, and like a range of countries that have had strong men who want to impose their own will rather than to trust market forces.
Yeah, it's a really striking shift. It's also different than the first term, and it's a reminder that these spectrums we're told about, left, right, don't account for everything. Because in this way, you call it interventionist, he's much more like a Chavez or a Castro or a Putin than he is anything we've seen in mainstream American politics. As for the new tariffs, everyone's heard about it. It's summer. We kind of feel like we've gone through this. But what is happening now in plain English?
Ari, you sound bored of the tariff story, and honestly, you should be, and so should your readers. But let me just tell you that we've just had probably a $300 billion tax hike. We've had an enormous tax hike, and Congress didn't see it once. Congress, of course, is the body that the Constitution gave the power to raise taxes. Trump on tariffs is the dog that finally caught the car. April 2, the deadline became April 9, became July 9, became August 1, finally became August 7, and right now you and I are paying tariffs at exorbitantly high rates. The White House is boasting that they've discovered that this raises taxes. Now, that's never been in question. It's obviously the case that when you impose taxes on people, you raise revenue. The real questions are, is this a tax that's efficient? Does it lead to better choices? And no, it doesn't. It's raising the cost on American businesses. Is this a tax that's equitable? No, it's not. Where Trump gave tax cuts to the richest Americans, tariffs are a tax hike that really affect those who spend most of their salary, and that's working and middle-class Americans. And is this a set of taxes that serves America's national interest? And as someone who just got back from 2 weeks in Japan and was talking to economists from all around the world, let me tell you that this is not serving our national interest in any way whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, you lay it out, and I never mean to seem bored. We all are experiencing these very action-packed times together. Justin, we'll be coming back to you this program, so I'll see you again soon. Coming up, Bob Woodward, the legendary journalist known for his nonpartisanship and his seriousness, has some words for Trump that go farther than we've just about ever heard from him. That's next.
It's pathetic that you have the president of the United States out there just pounding away and saying, oh, look, we have got to do it my way and only my way.
Strong words from Watergate journalist Bob Woodward there, telling us this week Trump's First Amendment crackdowns are, quote, pathetic. They are also, unfortunately, working on some of the most powerful companies in the country. This is the connective tissue from some of the other stories we discussed tonight. Paramount and Skydance have now closed their multi-billion-dollar merger after paying out Trump and having a controversial Colbert cancellation, which they said was financial anyway, but adds to the entire view that Trump is able to get his way with these corporations. Trump also has an active lawsuit against the Fox News sister outlet, The Wall Street Journal, over another story that remains in the news. It's reporting over Epstein-Trump links, which the Journal stands by. And we want to turn to a novelist who grew up in Russia and knows all about hardcore Soviet censorship. Gary Steingard has written Absurdistan and Super Sad True Love Story, just as we learn from political thinkers and authors of nonfiction. Sometimes when we turn to the people who are using their voice artistically even more broadly, it's very striking to see what they say. And when you add in the real world experience, he draws parallels from that Soviet crackdown to what Trump is doing right now. Take a look.
I grew up in a system where there's a lot of censorship. There were very few books you could read from abroad. I remember the one book that I was allowed to read was Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, but it had an introduction by one of Stalin's henchmen, which was
wow,
very fun introduction. Stalin wanted to purge all the, whatever, Mark Twain, etc. But I'm very worried about the kind of confluence I see between America and the and Russia. One thing Russia has always done is create its own. It doesn't just want you not to know the truth, but it tries to create a kind of alternate reality. I think when you grow up in a totalitarian or authoritarian society, it stains you no matter what happens to you later on. I mean, I still have a sense of distrust, a sense of lack of belief in certain systems, because when you grow up without knowing what the truth is, you spend the rest of your life wondering who you are and how you belong in a society. I was 7, 8 years old. I knew all the members of the Politburo by name. The politics were always around you. And my son, he's 11 years old, him and his friends, they talk about Trump all the time and about Trump's henchmen. It's almost like that's the idea, is that they become ubiquitous. And that's the only reality you know. Even if you have parents who are saying, okay, this is not great, it's the only world you know, because it finds its way censoring books like, for example, Toni Morrison, right, which is something a high schooler would read, but still denying people the ability to read, the truth about the African-American experience. That to me is shocking and so Soviet at heart. I've known friends in Russia who are completely silent on social media and every other mode that they can. There's a Russian term, a Soviet term, called writing into your desk, meaning that you know that what you write is going to offend the authorities, so you write into your desk so nobody else will see it. That's the danger. It becomes a chilling self-censorship, and that's something that I am absolutely worried about.
That's the danger. Writing into your desk. Gary Steingart was telling us about that during the First Amendment discussion we convened along with Geraldo. But the point runs deeply when you think about all these pressures on these companies who are the employers and purveyors of news, of culture, of entertainment, all the ways we understand the world around us. Donald Trump is less popular than he was when he won the election. There are, as you've seen, because you follow the news, great rebellions across the spectrum, from Epstein on the right to immigration on the left to a lot of economic concerns in the middle with rising prices. But if you have a closed society where people are afraid to voice those true feelings or report on them, then maybe the rest of the country lives through a distorted, confusing reality of, well, if everyone I know is concerned about this and it's not working, are you the one that's out of touch? There's a reason that autocrats use these tools, and people who've lived through it say not only is it bad for everyone in that country, but it's dangerous for distorting and consolidating the power of those who would not otherwise have public support to rule. That's why it is about free speech, but also so much more. We'll be right back. We're approaching the end of this long week, and we have a fallback for you. Look who's here. Justin Wolfers returns, and Gashi, who's about to embark on his Australia tour. 12 gold records. Nice to see you. Over 1 billion streams, and we're going to show folks just some of these collabs.
You ain't the one that I want, you the one I need. I'm posted with my clique, we ain't never flinch. Credit card, work the wrist, LeBron with the chip. I'll make it right, yes, I'll make it right with 2 lips. Cause she don't like roses. Cut the net off that rim now, give me my rings, my rings, my rings.
His new album is The Killer Whales of Gotham. Also joining us back from earlier in the hour, the economics professor Justin Wolfers, who has shared his insights right here on MSNBC, is a podcast star in this digital space. And he literally wrote the book on economics, textbooks that are actually used by students all over the world. You know, when you have to read for homework, you read that much closer. Welcome to both of you. Justin, you have made it into the cooler segment.
They said it would never happen, but Gashi, I hear you're going to Australia soon, mate. So let me know if you need to know some places to hang out.
Yeah, I'm still trying to fix this in here so I can hear you guys clearer. Sorry.
You're trying to take a minute because Justin's going to go first anyway. Gashi, take a second.
All right.
We'll get you settled. But Justin, very, very generous offer because the road is a hard life. But let's get your fallback. We've got this footage of something you actually mentioned tonight, but we didn't really get deep into it. And I don't know that everybody's followed it, which is watching a tech titan like the Apple CEO deliver, I don't know, a ceremonial gift to the president and what that means. Go ahead. You wanted that to fall back.
Mate, I just think CEOs going to Washington to kiss the ring is humiliating. And it's not just humiliating, it's bad for all of us. So, look, here we've got a bloke literally on live television walking into the White House with an object made of gold to give to the king. There was a time when you were meant to give these bribes under the table or when folks weren't looking. But, you know, things are different now, apparently. And look, there's a broader story, and I'm totally serious about this, by the way. Those CEOs owe their riches to the fact that we have a well-functioning capitalist economy and a democracy. Yet here they are, they're willing to give it away at the first sniff that they can do a little bit better for themselves and their companies. And I wish that they'd have the dignity to stand up. And I wish they'd understand that the democracy that their companies operate because the rest of us stand up against autocracy. And it's time for them to have the courage to actually say something about what's happening in front of us.
Yeah, and seeing it somehow brings it home because this is what Trump wants. And many years ago, people would have found it hard to believe that we're this kind of place where folks are coming in and giving out gifts, including, of course, a little bit of gold. He loves his gold. Gashi, how you doing?
Man, I just got this in-ear kind of settled in. It was a little distorted. We just fixed it.
Okay, good. Well, welcome to television. You know, I always tell folks it can be harder than it looks. People at home are like, why does Ari seem out of sorts? It's like, I got the earpiece, I got the mic, you know, it takes a second. So welcome. What's on your fallback list, sir?
I think I was coming up, we were picking either it was going to go, we were going to talk about the Boo Boo dolls, or I also want to talk about the fallback on the toys. The toys, I told AJ, I said, we should talk about that. I thought that was very important. You know, being an uncle, being
the price of toys.
Yeah, the price of
ahead.
toys. Yeah, because I was like, you know what? I have too many friends that love those dolls. I can't talk about them because then I may have to hear it as soon as I leave here. So I was just going to talk about the price of toys and, you know, how important it is for, especially now with parents being able to afford toys for their kids and what's going on. I'm an uncle to 4. You know, going to Target is like the best thing during the holidays, and being able to get stuff for the kids that they can afford. And I'm trying to do everything to keep them off the iPad right now because they love just being on that all day. But
right, off a screen, on a real toy. And you were saying, yeah, the way the prices are surging, we've seen that with the inflation in this economy. We've seen it with the tariffs don't help, depending on where the toys are coming from.
Yeah. It's just you know, we got to let kids be kids and be able, you know, because they get over them quick. They get over them quick as possible. They get over it. So, you know, just not having anything to be able to bring home and making it harder for people, especially in this climate that we're in right now, making it harder for parents as it is. I mean, especially during the summer when kids are not even in school, like, what are they going to do? You know what I mean? To be putting parents in that position is kind of difficult. You know, it's hard. So
yeah, I think that's an important one. And Justin knows all about, he said I was acting bored earlier with the tariff story, but he knows all about how those prices go up. Gashi, tell us about your tour. And is there anything you want to know about Australia from Justin?
My tour is coming up. First time ever going to Australia, ever. You know, I was on tour in 2020. The pandemic happened. I had to shut it down. I haven't been on tour since then. I was supposed to go to Australia, didn't. Now I have a chance to finally meet these fans who've been waiting for me for years. I get to finally meet them, see their faces. That flight's going to be long, but, you know, go to Australia and then come domestic, do a Europe tour. But then I can't wait to have a domestic tour where I get to be in the States, which I've never got a chance to do at all. And, you know, I'm very excited about it. The Killer Whales of Gotham is the first time me releasing an album independently since I left RCA Records. And, you know, my contract was up over there. It's been very difficult being an independent artist, especially in the climate when,
Sure.
you know, right now where it's like we're moving so fast at a rapid pace where everybody's just, you know, it's like you're it 1 second and the next second they're just looking at the Labubu doll or something. Like it's like the new thing.
There you
know?
go.
So
All
yeah.
right, well, so we're closing it out. What's your tip for the long flight, Justin? I got 20 seconds.
I'm just saying, Gashi, when you get to Australia, mate, you've heard about the spiders and the snakes. Look out for the drop bears. They drop out of trees and they just attack tourists. So just be careful. Always be wearing that hat, brother.
All right, I'm about to cancel this flight now.
Hey, who even knew? This is why we like our pairings. Gashi, your first time on the beat. Welcome. Good luck on the tour with the music you're making. Independent artists means you're not relying on these big companies. So appreciate you getting your voice out that way,
thank
Justin.
you.
Thank you. Absolutely. This is The Beat. Thanks for watching.